turn them off. That is the most heinous offence otherwise that you will be responsible for. If there is an emergency, which we are not to guide you in the right direction. The Prime Minister's speech will be on the record, but when we come to questions and answer afterwards, that will be off the record, and we ask you to respect that. It is an enormous privilege for us, Prime Minister, to be able to welcome you to RUSI, the oldest think tank in the world, founded by the Duke of Wellington an awful long time ago. And we are very much looking forward to what you have to say. The Prime Minister, of course, has been in office as Prime Minister of Norway since 2013, some 5 years ago, and has been leader of the Norwegian Conservative Party since 2004. So this, we have the privilege of one of Europe's most experienced statespersons, and that is something we much appreciate. The links between the United Kingdom and Norway obviously go back an extremely long way. The Vikings came here in a very friendly way more than 1,000 years ago. And the last time that the United Kingdom was ever successfully invaded were by people called the Normans. They spoke French, but of course, as we all know, they were Norsemen originally from your part of the world, Prime Minister. And during the hundreds of years that followed, the links were close, particularly for my part of the United Kingdom, for Scotland. I remember as a small child, a youngster, having to learn a ballad called The Ballad of Sir Patrick Spens. And the only two lines I now remember were, to Norway, to Norway, to Norway over the foam. 'Tis the king's daughter of Norway, 'tis we who must bring her home. Well, we haven't got the king's daughter today, ladies and gentlemen, but we do have a pretty impressive alternative in the Prime Minister. Britain and Norway have always, for years, had excellent, very, very close relationships. And in a sense, that's partly because we are both, in a European context, on the periphery of Europe, the geographical periphery of the continent. And so Britain has perhaps in recent times had an even increasing interest in matters Nordic, and the bilateral and multilateral relations between Britain and Nordic countries, including Norway, have been very, very special. And we are, of course, now poised to join that elite group of European countries that are not members of the European Union, thereby demonstrating that one can be in Europe even if one is not in the European Union. Enough from me. I now, with enormous pleasure, invite the Prime Minister to address us. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by thanking RUSI for, and particularly Dr. Karen von Hippel, Director General, for making this event possible. And I'd also like to thank Sir Malcolm Rifkin for the former British Foreign Secretary, for chairing this event. And I just reminded when you talked about the Normans, we do have an ongoing DNA case finding out whether, you know, the first Norman crusader who is who is buried in the abbey at Rouen, whether he is Danish or Norwegian. And it's a French expedition to find their ancestry, but maybe we'll sort that out. We can claim that he is Norwegian or not Danish. But it's a great honor for me to be here at Whitehall in the Royal United Service Institute. 2 centuries ago, RUSI has, during this time, RUSI has provided a stable vantage point for viewing changing in the global scene. And it's always inspiring to come to London. There's so much history here. And on my way here, I drove through Trafalgar Square, a place that reminded us of difficult times when the Napoleonic Wars were being fought between major powers in Europe. And for Norway, specifically, it reminds us that we were just a pawn in that game. We were, after the Napoleonic Wars, given from Denmark to Sweden. But we made our own constitutions on the way, so we managed to start the new Norwegian nation at that time. But Trafalgar Square is also a symbol of hope and unity. And it makes me think of the summer of 1940. Nazi forces had invaded Norway, and our king and government sought refuge here in London. In fact, the Norwegian Minister of Defense set up office at Cockspur Street, just off Trafalgar Square. And as Winston Churchill once said, one always measures friendships by how they show up in bad weather. And still the most important accomplishments were the things we did together. A close-knit community grows out of our joint effort. A community of allies that has stood the test of time. It has made Europe safer, stronger, and more secure. A community that is still vibrant and very much alive 70 years later. Together, out of the ruins of old Europe, we built a new security architecture that has served us well ever since. A new world order grew up, based on international law and strong international institutions. Today we are facing greater uncertainty than we have for decades. The individual threats are serious enough. But to me, there is even a greater concern. The way these threats seem to be combined to challenge the values and the principles that we have built for the past 70 years. There is even a risk that, even if they could erode the world order that has brought us so much progress, eventually that could be the risk we are now facing. Right on our doorstep, we have seen the emergence of a more assertive Russia. As a Russia where the democratic space at home is shrinking, but even more disturbingly, a Russia that has shown itself willing to violate international law in order to attain its objectives. This is deeply worrying, and even more so given Russia's size. Indeed, the chemical attack in Salisbury gives us an idea of the consequences that may follow if respect for international law is undermined. Through the last decade, Russia has significantly modernized its military capabilities, both their nuclear and their conventional. Its increasing military power is manifested through greater mobility, more flexibility, longer range, stronger firepower, and higher precision. Russia is becoming capable of threatening Europe without entering European territory. However, we from the Norwegian side, do not consider Russia's military posturing to be a direct threat to us. Most of its military activity in our immediate proximity is strategic. It's more a question of Russian force projection. At the same time, it is vital for us that the transatlantic lines of communication remain open. Furthermore, we all have interest in making sure that the Arctic and the North Atlantic remains areas of low tension and high predictability. Our NATO membership is essential when it comes to also our relationships with Russia. Whenever we have to deal with difficult security issues, we are stronger and we are more secure as part of the alliance. And we are stronger together. At the same time, it has been important for us to continue our bilateral cooperation with Russia in areas where it is an interest of both of our countries. This applies both to institutionalized cooperation and to informal people-to-people contact. These are important soft security measures in the border areas and between our countries. The Norwegian model is to deter and defend on one hand, and to ensure dialogue and engagement in areas of common interest on the other. To the south of Europe, vast areas of are lawless and ungoverned. Instability has taken root in a belt that stretches from the Sahel to Afghanistan. In many places, the authorities are unable to assert their authority, and the international community is struggling to resolve the conflicts, protect basic human rights, and provide humanitarian relief. In the past, instability in areas such as these would have very little impact on European security. Today, this is no longer the case. Indeed, terrorists and other criminal networks that thrive in countries affected by conflict and fragility can cause deaths and destruction far beyond their safe havens. And the growing list of European cities that have been hit by terrorism is a sad testimony to the global reach of these groups. But we are not just facing regional challenges, we are also facing global challenges. In the cyber domain, we need to strengthen international cooperation to protect our societies against serious digital threats, both from state and from non-state actors. While most countries would agree that international law applies in cyberspace, we still need clearer international agreement on how and when international law applies. And developments in the field of disarmament and nuclear proliferation had also given cause for concern. North Korea is progressing rapidly towards nuclear capabilities. And in the Middle East, the uncertainty surrounding the Iran deal could further destabilize an already volatile region. We are concerned about how this development will affect the future of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the international community's ability to prevent proliferation of nuclear weapons. At the same time, we face challenges when it comes to how we deal with international issues. More than ever, the international community feels a responsibility to protect human life, but far too often it is unable to reach agreements in the UN Security Council. And there are actors that are too willing to take advantage of our inability to act. The unipolar moment may be coming to an end. A growing partial paralysis may well be following. But in any case, arrival of American traditional strong leadership and staunch defense of the liberal order would be greatly welcomed. The challenge we are facing are not only external, they also come from within our societies. Across Europe, parties that harbor a deep sense of distrust of the political system have been growing. If they are given further opportunity to implement their policies, cooperation both in NATO and in the EU could be affected. This could undermine our ability to take collective action. It could also weaken the EU's position as a driver of democratic change in Europe and beyond. And while the worst case scenarios have been avoided so far, it is disturbing to note that only 11 countries in Europe were classified as full democracies in the 2017 Economist Democracy Index. Fundamental human rights, such as freedom of press, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, have come under pressure even in our part of the world. As for NATO, keeping the transatlantic bond strong has always required hard work. In fact, the unity that the allies have demonstrated in recent years with regards to Russia, to Ukraine, and to NATO reform has been quite remarkable. But we cannot take it for granted. In fact, we will probably have to work even harder in the years ahead in order to keep the alliance together and as it becomes more diverse. As threat perception differs more, as differences in political culture run deeper, and as political positions vary, as has already been the case in such as areas as trade, climate change, Middle East and Iran. And furthermore, we must succeed in addressing the issue of transatlantic burden sharing. But these are areas for growing changes and different views inside also NATO and EU. Fortunately, European defense budgets are not growing, but it's the output in terms of capability still leaves much to be desired. Years of decline have taken its toll. Just keeping up with maintenance is a challenge for many countries, let alone maintaining our competitive edge compared to rising powers. So how do we deal with this complex patchwork of internal and external challenges? And how do we tackle greater diversity among our allies? And how do we defend and uphold basic principles of international law in a climate of growing pressure? Well, I believe in the wisdom of Churchill's world that I quoted earlier on. I believe in the importance of deepening our relations with our closest friends and allies as the security landscape becomes more challenging. This is why Norway is stepping up its cooperation with the US, with key allies in Europe, and with our Nordic partners. And I would like to see an even closer UK-Norwegian security cooperation on all levels, bilaterally, in NATO, in Europe, and in common efforts to address global issues. So firstly, we must stand together in a strong and principled defense of international law and institution. The UK and Norway share a global outlook. For centuries, our merchant ships have crossed the oceans in pursuit of new opportunities. We have experienced firsthand the value of free navigation, open and regulated market, and rule-based world order. There are not only important principles for us. They are the basis of our wealth, the backbone of our foreign policy, and our first line of defense. That is why Norway cannot give in to protectionism. That is why we remain a tireless supporter of international law. And that is why we are unwavering in our support for the UN, the WTO, the IAEA. These abbreviations is very difficult when you do it differently in your own language. The OPCW, the OSCE, and the numerous other international organizations that in fact makes our world safer, more prosperous, and more secure. And it also is why we had to react on the incident in Salisbury. In solidarity with a close ally, certainly. In condemnation of a despicable act, absolutely. But also in defense of the very values and principles that set us apart. The stand between the world as we know it and lawlessness. In the years to come, we may find that a stronger and more principled defense of international law and institution will cost us more than it used to do. At times, we might find ourselves at odds with some of our allies. But I believe that the alternatives will always be more costly in the long run. Norway is a candidate for the non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council in 2021-22. Norway takes a solution-oriented approach to international issues. We believe at least, we are reliable and effective. And we have extensive experience in the field of conflict resolution, peace building, and humanitarian response. We attach great importance to strengthening the UN's ability to address the global challenges facing the international community. And as a member of the Council, Norway will seek to build bridges, find solutions that win broad support. We will demonstrate leadership and take on the difficult questions, because we have a global outlook. Small countries should have that, because that is our first line of defense to understand how we are affected by all the global issues that happen. This is one of the reasons why we are so deeply engaged in international development. That's why we contribute to joint military operations, and that's why we have drawn up a strategy for our efforts in states and regions affected by conflict and fragility. And year after year, we allocate more than 1% of our gross national income to development assistance. In fact, helping other countries to meet the SDGs is not just a moral imperative. I believe it's also good security policy. Our prosperity, welfare, and security depends also on the development in other parts of the world. Together with our partners, we must succeed in our efforts to fight poverty, to secure good health, services around the world, and, not at least, to educate more people. Secondly, the UK and Norway must work together to keep the transatlantic bond strong. Europe and US may not agree on all issues, but we must not forget how crucial the transatlantic bond has been on both sides of the Atlantic. NATO remains the bedrock of our security. It is the only framework that can provide credible collective security guarantees in Europe. And we should not underestimate the importance of political cohesion for transatlantic relations, nor the effects that can follow when cohesion erodes. But in this history of the alliance, relevance has mattered more. As long as NATO remains relevant to its member security concerns, I am confident that it will still have a role to play, and a deciding role to play. And this is why adaptation is so important. We must ensure that NATO remains relevant to all members and fit for purpose. At the upcoming NATO summit in July, the alliance will once again agree on important deliverables, despite the growing diversity of its members. The establishment of a new maritime command and a logistic command is a case of that point. This is an important achievement for the UK and Norway together. We have been working to increase NATO's focus on the North Atlantic and to modernize and adapt NATO's command structure to the changing security reality. We are also strengthening the transatlantic bonds by contributing to better burden sharing. This includes assisting other members. This is why my government has decided to invest more heavily in the Norwegian armed forces. We want to ensure that our national defense is adequate for these uncertain and unpredictable times. We strive to be a good ally, and since 2015 we have increased our defense spending by 25% in real terms. Our long-term defense plan involves further substantial increases in the coming years to upgrade our capabilities. These include deployable, interoperable and sustainable equipment, all the NATO phrases, such as high-end capabilities like a significant number of F-35 fighter aircrafts, first-class maritime patrol aircraft, new submarines, modern long-range air defense systems, and relevant strategic intelligence capabilities. My third point is that European cooperation on defense and security is crucial for our common security. Together, the UK and Norway should develop this cooperation even further. I very much welcome Prime Minister May's clear message of a continued British engagement in European security. The EU plays an important role in dealing with terrorism, hybrid threats, natural disaster, and in civil emergency planning. Our collaboration with the EU in these areas is strong and comprehensive. The EU members are also aiming at a stronger defence cooperation. And in Norway, we welcome this ambition. Stronger cooperation in developing capabilities, for instance, can give us better value for the money. It can also contribute to better transatlantic burden sharing. In addition, there are areas such as military mobility, where work in the EU can directly support and strengthen NATO's defence concepts. As the European security architecture is now evolving, it is critically important that NATO and EU continues to play complementary and mutually reinforcing roles. None of us can or should spread our resources more thinly through duplication. Complementarity is also vital for our ability to address the full spectrum of the threats we are meeting, from small-scale hybrid campaigns to large-scale cyber operation and high-end military conflict. Another key priority for my government is our relations with EU in early involvement. NATO has set an example in recent years by showing remarkable openness to key partners such as Finland and Sweden. I believe that the EU stands to gain from being more inclusive. If we are to deal with crisis effectively, the EU close partners must be involved at an early stage. It will enable us to quickly establish common situation awareness, to coordinate our positions, and to identify the contributions that we can make. Likewise, the further European defence market may benefit from being more open to other partners, both in terms of capabilities and in terms of economics of scale. The opportunity to draw on the advanced technology and expertise of the Norwegian and British defence industries would obviously be advantageous for future capability development in Europe. The fourth, the UK and Norway should continue to strengthen their bilateral defence and security cooperation and our political ties. Bilateral arrangements cannot and should not replace border institutions. This applies to trade, and it does as much as it does to security. However, cooperation in small groups of like-minded nations can strengthen organizations such as NATO by allowing faster progress and bringing down costs. Our cooperation with close allies such as the UK is a case of point, as it enhances NATO's capabilities and strengthens our national defence. Norway therefore remains committed to cultivate closer cooperation with both selected allies and Nordic partners. And UK is one of those allies that we have been deepening our defence cooperation with over time. The others are Germany, France and the Netherlands. All these countries are in a position to reinforce each other in a crisis, and their cooperation can also make the alliance stronger. In the case of the UK, we are building on a proud and long-standing tradition. Since World War II, our men and women have served shoulder to shoulder in operation and missions across the globe. Now we are strengthening our cooperation at home. Indeed, UK is our most important ally in Europe. We welcome the British Northern Group initiative from 2011. We appreciate the British-led Joint Expeditionary Force. This is yet another mechanism to deepen our cooperation. And we appreciate the cooperation with your Royal Marines, and its cold weather skill set is exceptionally important. And later this year, UK armed forces will take part in Trident Juncture exercise in Norway. This will be the largest NATO exercise in years. Our cooperation is far-reaching. It's not just on training and these capabilities. It includes areas such as intelligence, maritime surveillance, special forces, training, exercise and operation. And our acquisition of high-end capabilities such as F-35 fighter jets and P-8 maritime patrol aircraft. They will provide even more opportunities for cooperation, including in the North Atlantic. It will also be a test for military reinforcement and host nation support. Defence cooperation is important, but the very backbone of the cooperation between Norway and UK will always be our political and strong political ties. When Norway was invaded in 1940, it was the friendship of your people that rallied to support us. Selfless British soldiers who left the safety of their homeland to defend a foreign country. Courageous British decision makers who spared no effort to help a friend in need. This we will always remember. You showed up in bad weather, literally and metaphorically. Strong political bonds must continue to underpin our practical cooperation. This is why I believe we should meet and consult on one another very often. Why we should share more information than we do today. On the North Atlantic, on the development in Russia, on cyber threats, on joint operations, on how to fight terrorism, and on energy security, because that's one of the vulnerable parts of our modern societies, but also on current affairs. Security policy discussion often develop into discussion on tools and on capabilities. But more than anything else, security policy challenges the way we think. Our ability to assess whether information is reliable, to weigh the evidence, and to make quick decisions in difficult circumstances. Honestly and critically, that's how friends talk. So we meet here at Whitehall, a place charged with history. Our countries have a long shared history, which testifies for the value of accurate information throughout research and free debate. We know how important these are for making good decisions, developing sound policies, and building thriving societies. In recent years, the very concept of truth has come under fire. Fake news, covert information, propaganda campaigns by external actors have become a major challenge. Campaigns of this kind are a threat to the cohesion of our societies and to our ability to take action. They can make even the strongest and the best prepared society appear weak. It is precisely in times like this that we are reminded of the foresight of people like Lord Wellington that showed when they founded institutions like this. Indeed, in the face of false information, I think we all are called to action, not to weapons, but to action. Decision makers, members of the general public, young and old, men and women, students and professors alike, we must seek reliable information, assess sources critically, and make sure that our voices are heard. It might seem that these times are particularly challenging, but we do live in a world that is becoming better every day. It's just more uncertain these last years. But the tasks we need to fulfill are the same as those previous generations did. It's our turn to safeguard our values and to safeguard our interests. It's our turn to speak up for free, open societies based on democracy, based on rule of law, human rights, and open market economy. Because we cannot take these models for granted. We must work to make the world we really want a reality every day. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Prime Minister, for that very, very wide-sweeping and very incisive description both of Norwegian policy and of some of the wider problems that we share. We now have about 20 minutes or so, just over 20 minutes, for questions on any subject that anyone in the